Hello, everybody. I'm Kevin Markowski, CEO at Speech, a brand experience software, and also the co-host of this event. Welcome to the last session of the day. We are going to talk about the 2022 forecast for e-commerce and digital marketing. And before starting, I would like to welcome Humbert from Pede Paola on stage. Hi, Humbert.
Hello,
also,
Kevin.
Michael from cm.com.
Hey, everyone.
Hello, Michael.
Nice to see you.
And Joachim from Shopify.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone. So before starting the discussion, can you guys introduce yourself in a few words? So let's start by Humbert.
Sure. Well, thank you guys for having me. Exciting to be here. So as you're saying, I'm Humbert. I'm co-founder and CEO at Pede Paola, which is a digital native vertical brand focusing on jewelry products. So we started off, we've been in business for 6-7 years now. Our main market is Europe. We also have like global presence. So we consider ourselves pretty much a global seller through Shopify, of course. And very excited to be here to discuss like trends on the digital and e-commerce space.
Cool. So you probably already know Joachim from Shopify then.
Of course, yeah. We actually went to the same university, so we knew each other.
Oh, even more. So let's go next with Joachim then.
Yeah, thanks for having me too. So I'm Joachim. I'm French and Norwegian. Studied in Barcelona, and I'm based out of Barcelona. I work at Shopify and have been for 3 years now, even though I fell into the e-commerce world in 2010 right after school, and have been in the space for 11 years. And yeah, I spent 4 years in New York, and that's where between 2014 and 2019, that's where I discovered Shopify's hyper growth. And when they decided to expand in Europe, I joined them in 2018 to lead partnerships across EMEA, and especially in France in the past two and a half years. And that's pretty new, but I'm also switching to the Spanish market in before the end of the year. So I'm going to be focusing on Spain and Southern Europe at the beginning of next year.
Right. So we're going to meet in Barcelona for sure. And then Michael.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. Michiel in Dutch. I'm the former brand chief of Robin HQ. We are a tech and consultancy company from the Netherlands, specialized in e-commerce customer service. Last year, we were acquired by cm.com. It's a listed company in the conversational commerce space with more than 900 employees all over the world. I'm currently an evangelist at cm.com, and I'm helping companies adapt to conversational commerce solutions and build intelligence for the brand new generation. So here I am. I'm glad to be participating to this discussion.
Perfect. So thanks, guys, for introducing yourself. So let's start with Humbert for a first question. So talking about forecast for 2022, we know that today marketing in the e-commerce industry is becoming more and more challenging. How today and for the next year as well, how can we differentiate our business from others based on digital marketing and e-commerce?
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant question these days, right? Because we feel what we've seen over the past few years is that, obviously platforms like Shopify and the lookalikes have been basically democratizing access to digital commerce. So almost anyone with a few bucks in the pocket can just open up an online store, right? So obviously this has created tons of new competitors popping up like crazy, basically. So we've seen that over the past few years. So very clear trend there. And the fact that we have new competitors flooding the market more and more, this is putting some pressure on the digital marketing channels, obviously, because we all know that, launching a website, it's not only about pushing the green button. You need to make yourself visible out there. So it's very important to, not only, let's say, have a digital presence across multiple channels, but also differentiate yourself to be meaningful for your audience, right? So the people you're targeting. And basically, I think what is key, and then also what we learned, is that having a very powerful brand DNA for us, what has worked over the past few years is having like a very strong image, so brand image, so brand DNA in terms of visuals, this has really helped a lot. So this is something that I would advise definitely, to have a very strong DNA. Also, even if you have a very strong DNA, but your value proposition as a brand doesn't resonate enough, I think that's not going to be. I think that's not going to cut it, to put it in a way, right? So you also need to have a very clear value proposition in terms of what is the solution that you're offering to your customer, right? Whether it's fashion product, whether it's whatever industry you're in, you need to have a very clear understanding of why your customer is gonna buy from you, right? So, and then last but not least, I would say that building trust very quickly is also very important, because word of mouth obviously plays a big role more and more. As we all know, and I'm sure this is gonna be in the discussion in a few minutes, but marketing costs are inevitably going up due to demand pressure, and one of the few reasons to fight against this is trying to maximize your organic reach, and building trust is very important in order to do that. So to make sure that people are going to talk about your brand and talk about your website, right? Whether you're just a multi-brand commerce or you're just a digital brand or whatever you are, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting point, and I'm going actually to jump on this point about trust, and I will jump with Michael. So the trust actually is more and more so challenging with the new generation arriving on the market, and we saw that the customer service experience is also changing. Michael, what is the most important to know about it right now, about customer service experience, and specifically linked to the different type of generation on the market?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, 2020 was a tipping point in terms of generations. So the millennials and Generation Z they're now in the majority. So these guys have completely different behavior and completely different expectations than their predecessors. They want faster responses. They want more personal responses. They use multiple channels. Like all in all, I mean, bottom line is that the expectations are really going up. So where you were used to do service as a sort of scripted thing, where you used to send like an email and you would get an auto reply back. It's like, oh, thanks so much for the email. You've been registered under number 455 and you just became a number, and they don't even know your name anymore. And it's sort of asynchronous and it's reactive. And I think that kind of service is of the past. So people are now used to the fast personal dialogue that they're used to with their friends and their family. I mean, my grandmother is on WhatsApp. So this is what people are used to. And I think adapting this new fast and more personal way of doing customer service takes a very different approach. And service used to be an afterthought. So, and now it's people really demand service in all stages of the journey, also in pre-sales. So it's really changing your headset on service. And I think to accommodate this, especially you're going to get a higher demand of service requests. So you also need to automate things. And you need to respond faster. So it's going to have a big impact on your organization. So you need to automate more, but you also need to up your game in human service. And I think at this point it becomes really difficult to give sort of like advice that's generic. So because it really depends on the scale of your business, the nature of your product, the size of your assortment, and all that stuff. But I think all in all, what I always want to advise is that do your research and try to at least understand the basics of automation, for instance. What I hear a lot, I hear a lot of people speak about AI as if it were, the best thing since sliced bread, and it might, cut your customer service questions by 90%, and it might in time. I think it actually will in time, but not yet, and certainly not without effort. So it takes structural data and content creation, integration, front-end experience, channel strategy. It's a big effort, and you need to be really focused on it. So, my first advice to even starting web stores would be to really understand the difference between scripted automation, if this then that. There's a lot possible in that, and AI stuff, and make sure you can you're able to achieve, little thing, but maybe even big results through simple automation. So that will be my advice, to understand the basics of automation really well and see what it can do for your business, because you need to up your game in service, up your people, but you at the same time you're going to have to automate, because otherwise you can't handle it.
Yeah, correct. And you were saying about multi-channels and customization. I think we should also mention social media. And actually, I have a question for Joachim on it. So today, more than ever, why do brands need to rethink their social media strategy? And I think it can be a good continuation of what Michael was saying just before.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, both Michael and Humbert, talked about things that are impacting the social media strategy of many of our brands. And the year and a half that we just spent also has seen an acceleration of a lot of trends that were happening, but like this has definitely, we made a huge jump forward. And the usage, especially of generations like the Gen Z and the millennials, are spending much more time online, on social media, buying. There was a commerce report that came out a couple of weeks ago that said that 70% of millennials and Gen Z shoppers are spending more time now than they used to a year ago, and more than 50% are discovering the brands on social media. So these are trends that brands need to kind of adapt to. And the second thing I would say is also related to what Humbert was saying is, there's more brands, more competition, there's more people browsing online, so the costs are inevitably going up. So it's not just about discovering and acquiring new customer through social media, but you need to create meaningful, and holistic experience across all the different social media channels that the brand is present on. And these social media channels also vary from brand to brand, like depending on your target audience, your customers, like where do they spend their time, and you want to really adapt, your messaging and the means that you're reaching your customers to accordingly. But yeah, I think the most important thing I would say, and again coming back to what Humbert and Michael were just saying, is connecting with your audience, in an organic way, really making a connection, between the brand and its customers, so that they relate, they get identified, and in the end they become much more than just one-time customers, which is what all the brands are here to look for. So that's some of the
that's an interesting point, because indeed loyalty today is very, very important, and we see also the importance of also rethink the loyalty. And actually on that, I have like some question for Humbert. Why should brands focus more on loyalty instead of one-shot acquisition, and how they can make it today?
Yeah, so going back to what Joachim was saying, I really agree with what he was saying in regards to how important it is to connect with your audience, because ultimately we need to work towards building this kind of organic reach that is gonna maybe accelerate, or it's gonna give some meaning or some purpose to all the paid advertisement that we're doing, right? Otherwise, it's just like trying to run the rat wheel. You know what I mean? It's like a money burning machine where it never ends. So back in the day, like 3-4 years ago, where we didn't really have that level of competition in the market, people were not focusing so much on customer retention and customer service because they didn't have to. I mean, you just put €1 or $1 on Facebook advertisement, you got $2 very easily, $3 as a return from your investment, right? Now, obviously, it's not the same. It's not how it used to be. So the way I like to explain to my team is like, imagine you need to fill in a water jar with water, right? Back in the day, like water was flooding, and you were filling up the water jar like quite quickly with no problem. But then this water jar had some holes in it, and to me, like making sure you have like a great customer service, great customer experience, like trying to fix these holes to make sure that all the money you're spending on acquisition stays inside the jar, right? Because I mean, there's absolutely no sense in spending thousands and thousands of dollars acquiring customers and then not spending a dime or trying to bargain and trying to avoid or trying to cut cost on retention. So this is how we look at it internally, and obviously this is something that brands need to be thinking about for sure. Actually, we're already thinking about what's gonna be strategic for us in from 2022, and we're more and more devoting more resources and more people and more talent into customer acquisition, because we know that the future success will depend mainly on how satisfied the customers are, and a big chunk of this satisfaction will come ultimately from the after sale experience. So there's a lot of technology that needs to go there. There's a lot of automation that needs to go there, as we were saying before. There's a lot of also human emotion and human talent, because ultimately, of course, you can pull out some AI and some wizard technology that can do the dirty work for you. But ultimately, you're going to be talking to people who are sitting on their couch. So this human touch, this can't be lost, and this is something that we really believe in. And I think these are the challenges. But this obviously, you need margin to pay for all of this. So what kind of product you're selling also plays a role, because you can't bear all this cost structures, acquisition, retention, all of it, if you have a low margin product, right? So it's becoming increasingly challenging also from a product selection perspective, but definitely retention and customer service is something that every brand out there should be focusing on right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. And in terms of innovation, you actually mentioned the AI, which is actually coming more and more for the digital marketing. And I have a question for Michael on that, because today, based on omnichannel marketing, brands are now able to get much more data than before, including the social media data. And what are the challenges and opportunities on that?
Sure. Do you mind if I just comment on the loyalty bit for a little bit?
Sure.
I would just like to bring in this point, because I'm sort of passionate about this. Because yes, I mean, loyalty, I subscribe to Humbert's story totally. But I also do think that people are sort of especially consumers, are inherently maybe not loyal like as they are to their friends or their wives. They're loyal to your brand or your product because they love your product, they love your brand, but you're kind of as good as your last hit. And I think when you're looking at CX and optimizing customer experience, I mean, it's great to create beautiful customer experiences with wizards and technology and stuff like that. But I think loyalty also needs to be viewed in two buckets. I mean, building loyalty, but also making sure people are not disloyal and that they're not leaving. And the biggest reason why people buy from you is because of your product and brand, but the biggest reason they're leaving is because of your customer service. And satisfaction is sort of a limited indicator, because satisfaction kind of measures the last sort of feel after an interaction. So people could place an order on your website. You ask them, how satisfied are you? Super satisfied. I'd recommend you to all my friends. 10 minutes later, where's my order confirmation? Oh, this joint sucks. I'm never coming back. I'm complaining on Twitter. This is as fast as it goes. So I think that in terms of your best bet on building loyalty, and this of course depends on who you are. I mean, Humbert, you have a very successful store, but if you're only just starting, I mean, if you're in your maturity path, make sure you're focusing on reducing customer effort, which is the one scientific thing proven to build loyalty. We are super lazy people, and when things are more effort, people just bail. So I think it's really important to look at your pain points and start optimizing from that, which is also where customer service plays a big role, because you can look at your customer service questions and understand where you're making the mistakes. So that's just something that I wanted to bring in, based on loyalty. But you were asking me about data, right?
Yeah, no, it's actually very, very interesting, and I think now everything that we can do on loyalty is also linked to the data, and actually what I was also saying before. So I was saying based on your first answer on the first question, you were mentioning the multi-channel marketing, and also now the crazy things about you can actually have data from customers almost everywhere on your channels, and then you can centralize everything and get much more data than in the past.
Yeah.
And which kind of challenges and opportunities this full data can bring?
Yeah, well, I think we're definitely moving. You know, we're now CX is now the buzzword. In 5 years' time, it's going to be customer intelligence. So, and I think obviously one of the big challenges that people have on an operational level is to bring all that data, you know, central in one data warehouse or one data lake or whatever you want to call it. But I think secondly, and maybe even firstly, is knowing what to do with it. So, you know, I have a lot of customers, they're always asking me, it's like, yeah, we need more data. And then I kind of start peeling off the onion. It's like, what are you going to do with it? And then they often don't really have the use cases ready. They're kind of like, no, we just want the data, which is fair enough, but it's you need to come up with concrete use cases. And I always kind of challenge them and I say, okay, are you still sending customers newsletters and coupons on the day that they complained on social media or at your customer service department? Because that's the first, I think, hole you need to plug. You know, when people complain, don't send them a newsletter. You know, it's that kind of data synchronization that I think is first. So, you know, as for opportunities, I'd say plug these kind of holes. But I think it's also really important to, you know, offer your customer service team contextual data. You know, it's one of the things we do well as a product is that we have an omni-channel, you know, core product with, you know, all the data from the customer, whatever the customer channel uses, it's all there. And you need to give that contextual data to your agents to give them, you know, the data they need to help the customer, because real-time customer service agents don't have time to look up stuff in different systems. They need to be able to personalize the experience straight away. So, and these kind of integrations are fairly easy to do. So, and also customers expect this knowledge to be there with agents. That's all the way in all the reports. Customers just simply expect that. So you don't want customers to repeat themselves. So it's these kind of opportunities, I think, that are first and foremost. And maybe second, you know, I would say once you get a little bit more mature, learn from your customer service questions. I mean, please, you know, understand what your customers are asking questions for. And maybe as an example, just last year, I was consulting to a big retail store in vitamins, and they were asking for a chatbot. And we always go like, okay, what are your customer service questions about? You know, what would you like to, which volume would you like to reduce? And they were a bit like, yeah, I don't know, as long as it gets reduced. So we got into the data and we found out that actually mentioning on your website when a product restocks would save them 20% of their customer service volume. We couldn't find any use case that would do better. So we said, do this first and then talk about chatbots. You know, so it's really learning from the inside out, learning from the customer service, as opposed to thinking up big initiatives for automation. You know, learn from your customers, and customer service is a great way to do that. So I think there is a second opportunity. And then just to add, long-term challenge, and this comes back to the branding story of Humbert, is that privacy, permission, value is going to drive this whole thing. So in the next year, in the next 10 years, I think we're going to see the democratization of customers who take back the privacy, and brands are going to get exactly what customers give them. So, you know, you have a great proposition, you send great newsletters, fine, keep sending me a newsletter. If not, I'm cutting you off. You know, and that goes for a lot of things. So I think ultimately that's your challenge when it comes to data and customer intelligence.
Yeah, I like a lot what you said about like customers today. They expect the brand to know about them, and they don't give any other chance if you don't reach this objective. And actually the brands today, they have no excuse to not know about their customers, because there are so many data everywhere, and if they are using actually the right tools, they can actually like get a lot of things and create like an interesting customized marketing strategy for that.
Correct.
Joachim, so we were talking about a little bit before with Humbert and Michael about well, we know that it's not really profitable to acquire a new customer without working on loyalty. Also that the loyalty is also today a very old-fashioned word, and how today brands can innovate with loyalty. I mean, today we can see so many strategies about, like, for example, building ambassadors program, or turning consumers into nano influencers, micro influencers, or even rewarding their consumer journey, and not only the purchase, but also each time they're going to engage with the brand. So how can brands innovate with loyalty today and in the future?
Yeah, great question, and it's close to home because I also launched a store on Shopify, and I relate to what Humbert was saying about the rat wheel, and it felt like I was just pouring money into Facebook to acquire new customers, and then like until you realize everything that has to come around, it's only when you really see kind of the end of the tunnel of getting a profitable brand, yeah, like we're lucky at Shopify to see many brands innovate across many ways, and especially in customer loyalty, and I think Humbert and Michael really touched a few of the very interesting aspects of how to create a very loyal customer base. I think the first one is really about understanding your customers. So not only as you said at the purchase moment, but way before, how they browse, how they engage with your company, on which channels, when do they come to the website, what's the journey on the website, before the buying button. There's so many things and ways the customers engage with your brand, and you need to understand that and have a clear view of what happens, and that's where D2C brands relying on technologies like Shopify, and there's many others, where you have one source of truth. When you're owning your customer data, you have a holistic view, one center of truth, where you have you kind of oversee and you have the central cockpit of all the operations that are going on around your brand. Is super important. And then there's many ways that you can make use of this data that you're kind of getting from all these impacts from your customers. And you mentioned nano influencers, converting some of your customers and ambassadors, and again coming back to our connect discussion before, like customers need to really relate with the brand, and there's great tools like speech, cm.com, that come into this whole experience in order to provide the more personalized experience across the whole customer journey. And that's, I think, the most important thing, understanding your customer, and then like using all of these great tools around every step of your customer journey to understand your customer and like be there how they want and when they need it.
So be sometimes a little bit more, or at least like try some organic strategies and not only paid, can be also an interesting strategy, especially for new brands stretching their brand on Instagram, TikTok, stuff like that.
I mean, I launched the store early this year, and it was based on the unpaid at first, and it didn't work out. So that's when we realized, you need to everything that we just said to build that around, and the organic is going to become increasingly important, and retention. I think I saw a number that retaining a customer is 7 times cheaper than acquiring a new one. So this, coupled with the fact that customers are browsing more and more, is going to make all these
and also a loyal customer is increasing the purchase basket, is referring friends as a new customer as well, so it has actually a lot of activities to the brand, and actually we can see that also the consumers can sell your brand's product to other consumers as well later. So it's also an interesting thing. So Humbert, which mistakes can brand make today in 2022 and how to avoid it? So we were actually talking about focusing on paid advertising, for example, or this kind of mistake. What are the mistakes that you could mention today, and how to avoid it in the future for the brand?
Well, I think I've made every single mistake, so I'm the right guy to speak about mistakes. But no, I mean, I could be talking days about this, and it's very interesting. But if we had to narrow it down to the customer experience, and I think there's one though that I need to say, even if it's a bit, aside from the topics that we're discussing, which is you need to know your numbers. I mean, a lot of merchants, a lot of people don't know their margins. It is very important if you're trying to scale a brand. We know building a brand takes time, right? I always say to my team, like, Louis Vuitton wasn't built in 2 days, so let's not hurry too much. We're trying to build a global brand here, like that. We need to little by little, like, convince the consumer that we're here to stay and that we're here to resonate with their lifestyle or whatever, right? So the first thing I would say, like, the first mistake that I see quite often is people who don't know their numbers. So they really don't have any clue on how much they can spend to kind of even both acquire the customer or retain this customer, to get him to come back, right? So for me, this has been the backbone of our strategy, to be able to bootstrap a brand from scratch, basically, with no investors at all, as we did. And the very key to doing that was we knew our numbers from the very beginning. So we had a very clear idea of how much we could spend to acquire a customer and what we needed to do to get him to come back, right? So this would be the first thing. Then connecting more on the topics that we were discussing, I would say not putting customers first is something that happens, and it's very you don't realize it, but it happens without, it's not something that you want to do on purpose, like forget about your customer, but you end up spending so much time on your product, on your solution, on your business, like, am I being profitable, that you forget about the customer's needs. And ultimately, it's all about customer satisfaction, right? I mean, business down the road, as long as there is customer satisfaction down the road. And Amazon style, sometimes at internal meetings, we leave like an empty seat, like trying to imagine that the customer is on sitting with us on that meeting and has a very strong opinion, and ultimately he's the one deciding everything, right? So I would say forgetting about the customer is a mistake that I see quite often. Then I'd say also then not diversifying your acquisition channel is also a mistake. I mean, a lot of people think that it's very easy to just jump with a couple bucks on Instagram and then trying to drive traffic. You will drive traffic, that I can guarantee. You will drive traffic if you advertise, but the way we try to look at it is like opportunity is where the herd is not going, right? So every time there is an opportunity, the mass market goes there, and it's like the opportunity ends up balancing and there's no opportunity anymore. So it's what's actually happening. So we need to be original and go back to the basics and try to think more originally as to how to approach customers, how do we diversify our marketing channel to get to our audience, and how to become relevant, right? So I think focusing only on one channel for advertising and driving traffic is a mistake, because ultimately you're going to find yourself in a trap where you're gonna find out that it's like the rat wheel that we were discussing about before, right? So this comes along with being patient, because it's very tempting to think, okay, I have $100 to spend on advertisement, I'm going to get traffic right away. Traffic right away means sales right away. Sales right away means potential profit right away. And it's very easy to fall under this trap that you can scale the business super fast. It could be done a few years ago, but I think now the scenario is a little bit different. At least this is what we're seeing, right? So I would say try to find opportunity where no one else is looking for. Maybe traditional marketing channels like press. I mean, these channels are becoming increasingly cheap. So why not having a balanced combination between the two worlds, right? It doesn't include digital. Digital is very trendy, is very fashionable, but ultimately people have a life outside their phones. Well, maybe not so much anymore, but they do have a life. No, they commute to work. They see billboards on the street. I mean, all of this is generating value. Although I understand that when it's difficult to track these results, then it's very hard to bet on it, because obviously you're not getting the information back, right? But yeah. And another mistake, if I have the time, is don't be boring. Even if you're copying a value proposition from a brand that is working, which, Spain is the #1 market in doing that. I mean, every time there's a startup that's killing it, everyone's doing the exact same thing, exact same proposition. Like, we're the kings at this. And try to have your own unique point of view, or how you approach your product, or how you approach your communication, how you approach your brand narrative and visuals. This is very important to stay authentic, because this is where you're going to find your blue lake, like your blue ocean, right? It's like, even if you're a very niche product, you're going to find the world is very big. And even if you're a niche product now, that doesn't mean that the market is very small. I mean, even for a niche product and a niche value proposition, you're not going to be able to have 100% of market share of that niche. So make sure that you have like a very original brand proposition or value proposition, I would say. And yeah, this would be basically a few advices, or the main mistakes that I see quite often. And most of these mistakes we've been doing them over and over again. Suddenly, even though you have very clear in mind like what you need to avoid, you find yourself in that situation again and again. And it's about having this mentality of thinking about it on a constant basis, I think.
So to be patient, to diversify the action, and to be creative. And so to keep going with actually the mistakes and failures, Michael, we hear about customer experience and brand experience almost everywhere today. Why do brands still fail with this today?
I know. CX was the buzzword. I mean, it was the buzzword, 5 years ago. It's still the buzzword, and it'll probably remain the buzzword for a long time. I think bigger brands are really starting to nail it. They are, from phone companies to energy companies, doing it really well. So I think the data also tells us that the CX gap, that between what customers expect and what companies can deliver, is starting to decrease. But it still really depends on who you are as a brand. If you're a big phone company, you have a team on this. You have a team that does CX, that works data, that creates content, that creates integrations, that creates front end experiences. That's really difficult to do when you're a smaller, a smaller outfit. It's really difficult to do all that stuff at the same time. That's why I always give people the advice to start with the pain points. Start reducing disloyalty. And I think also, I have to subscribe to all the things that Humbert just said, and I'm humbly behind him in all those advices, because you actually run a big e-commerce store. I don't, I think that one of the things you said, like keeping keeping customer centric, it's actually really difficult. You have this sentence in Dutch where we say you have to keep the customers centric, central, we say, and it's a bit pat. It's a bit like, like as opposed to not keeping him centric, but it's really difficult to do, because also when you start automating things, you're going to make trade-offs, and the one thing I say needs to be your Northern Star is effort. Don't shift effort to the shopper, and if you do it consciously, and be aware that if you do, they're going to find a way to come back at customer service to get their problem solved anyway. So whatever you do, keep your customer in mind, and how easy it is for the customer to sort things out. That needs to be your Northern Star, because you're going to gain so much more on that, not just in the long term, but also in the short term, because but people's questions are always quite unique, and especially in e-commerce. A lot of times, one of the things that I think is super important is that keep people updated on delivery stuff. Like, when is your order getting there? Give them the steps. But often the questions are, where's my order? You can't automate it because they already had a message. They know where their order is at, and it hasn't arrived. Process is broken. Make sure you're there to answer these questions in time. So keeping the customer centric is like a super important thing, and difficult to do. I've subscribed to what Humbert just said there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and actually that's interesting that when you face an issue with a brand, that actually the customer can become actually more loyal with this brand if this issue is solved very well by the brand. And that's interesting, because you can actually increase loyalty after an issue comparing to if you don't have any issue with the brand.
Yeah, it builds trust. It's an opportunity to build trust. But it's also really depends on who you are. I always have this little matrix in mind with, on the one hand, you have the purchase frequency, and here you have the margin. So if you have a fairly good margin and people return to your store twice, 2 times a year or 3 times, then, every customer service interaction can be seen as an investment in the customer relationship. Whereas if you sell a very small product with only limited margin and people buy from you once every 4 years, you can't afford customer service. You need to have a really hot e-commerce process, great self-service, no customer service, man. You can't afford it. So it really depends on where your business is at. But yes, if you screw up and your customer service makes up for you, then you demonstrate that they can actually trust you and that you solve the problem. So it's a great opportunity to build loyalty for sure. Yeah. Totally.
Correct. And talking about consumer experience and consumer journey, Joachim, consumer journey also means talking about brand experience and omnichannel marketing. Today at Shopify, what are the big trends in this field that you can see from brands?
Yeah, great question, and I think we're touching a lot of these aspects in the discussion. But I think the biggest trend is one that we just mentioned. You have to be where your customer is. So that means across all your omni-channel channels. So if it's offline, you have to have a greater experience on social media, on portals, on the website. We just talked about video, or there's a question about videos. Like now there's ways of engaging in async videos on your website. There's you can organize live shopping experiences. You can co-create your next product with your audience in online or physically. So all these ways, and again, understanding your customer is key, and all these ways, understanding different channels, and having one center of truth where everything comes back is key. But and then B2B, like we're seeing increasing trends on B2B and B2B marketplaces, because retailers or other brands also are interested in great products and great experiences. So yeah, it's being present wherever your customer is, and that's across any channel, offline, online, marketplace, social media, or your online store. And that's like one of the biggest trend that we're seeing, and then like also there's a lot of new innovations innovations coming up, and again the pandemic has accelerated experiences or tools like QR codes, curbside pickup, people coming to your store to pick up their products, delivery times which are much shorter, and all of that needs to be also taken into consideration to really shorten kind of the customer experience, and make sure that you create the best value across all channels.
All right, so we run a little bit out of time, but we don't care because we are the last roundtable of the day, and we also have a good time. So I'm going just to finish with one question for all of you, and then I will just pick 1 or 2 last questions from the audience. So just in few quick words, first Humbert, then Michael, and then Joachim. If I want to launch my e-commerce in 2022, what are your most valuable tips in a few words?
Do I start?
Yeah, you can start. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to answer from the perspective of someone who is trying to think, okay, I want to be in the e-commerce game. What do I sell? To these people, I would say, first of all, pick a product that you're passionate about, number 1, and pick a product that has a high margin, number 2. I can't stress enough how important this is. In the environment that we're living today, how the digital marketing advertising channels are, in terms of pricing and so on, you need to have a margin. Otherwise, it's very, very hard. Although you may have some personal firepower that you can leverage as well. For example, you can be, an influencer yourself. You can have a base of, followers of 100,000 followers on Instagram, obviously you need to leverage that, right? But if you're starting from scratch, very important to pick a product that has a very high margin and that you're passionate about, because you're gonna need to work very hard on it to perfect it, right? Then second, I would say pick a product also that it's very low on seasonality, because inventory and working capital is something also very, very important to have success with your own store. So make sure that you can optimize as much as you can your inventory levels, that you have capital at use to spend on marketing and visibility. Otherwise you're going to be pretty much stuck. And then I think brands nowadays were doomed to become media companies, like not brands anymore. That means that we need to have a purpose as a brand, and if we don't have a purpose, we're not going to be meaningful for our audience. And I think the worst thing that can happen to you as a brand is like to not be meaningful for your audience. This is irrelevance is the worst thing that can happen. So you need to really try to avoid irrelevance by building a strong brand DNA, as I was telling you a few minutes ago, and be authentic in your communication, and have a story and have a storytelling, and be very powerful with your imagery and this kind of stuff, right? I think it's very, very important. So this would be my advice, is to quite I would say theoretical ones, but if I could go back, the fact that I'm in jewelry, it was a completely coincidence. I mean, when I started my business, I didn't think let's look for a product that has a high margin. I mean, we did find this product by it was luck, pure luck, but then a few years later, you can really tell that the one of the main things that has allowed us to scale the business is the distance between your purchase cost and the price that you're selling at your market.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, great advice. I mean, I would say, listen to Humbert. He did it before, and go to the Shopify blog. They have a lot of good advice there. So that would be my advice. But let me put in my 2 cents. As a branding expert, I really value honesty, and like Humbert just said, authenticity. And I think managing expectations is something that people need to do really well. I see a lot of starting brands with great products, kind of not being transparent on their delivery times, on their stock levels and stuff like that. And it's going to bite you in the backside. It's going to give you negativity. It's going to create a lot of operational problems. These customers will not return to your store anymore, only to complain or to return the product. So, I think you got to manage expectations and be honest and clear. And I would say, yes, have a very strong, unique product, show some personality, preferably have a small focused assortment, even go local, build your community from there, and pair a great product with great customer service, because it gives you a little bit more slack over the other 2 pillars in your proposition, namely price and delivery, because you don't want to compete on price, and delivery is a hygiene factor. So products and service is the key words.
All right, thank you very much. Joachim, we know that thanks to Michael that we can go to the Shopify's blog, but if you have actually some advice.
I'm sorry, did I take your answer there?
So, you actually launched your e-commerce recently also, so you can actually have some valuable tips, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great things were said, and some of which I was gonna mention, and maybe one that we left out is technology. Bet on the right tools. There's so many great, amazing no-code tools out there to help you, throughout your journey. There's tools that allow you to really focus on the right things. Building a community, building your brand, finding the right products, and that's the kind of things that you want to do when you launch your brand, and you don't want to be stuck with technical, issues, details, or things, throughout especially when you're starting. So, the bet on the right tools. We mentioned, omnicanality. So I'm not gonna come back to this one. And the last one, it's also another thing we mentioned is community, connection. Build a brand with purpose, with with a strong DNA, and that comes with a great product, with being passionate about what you're building. So you're really finding a product that you identify with, that you really relate to, and then it's just about transmitting the right personality, values, and coming up as trustworthy, answering, it's basic things, but if it comes from a place of passion, and something we didn't speak about today, that Michael brought up, which is also something we're seeing among a lot of Shopify brands, is like, all this concept of sustainability, building local products, sourcing, locally, and really having a positive impact around you, is also something that we're increasingly seeing. And some of the most successful brands on Shopify, come from that, kind of sustainable way of doing things. Yeah.
Right, thank you very much. So we are going to take only one question from the audience, and there is one that I like a lot. It's actually about vision, trends, and innovation. So, in your opinion, what gonna be the main trends or the main innovation that will be driving e-commerce and digital marketing in the upcoming years? So some people from the audience just mentioned the voice search, the AI, etc. So in a few words, what do you think gonna be the main innovation for that? The same order, Humbert first.
I don't have time to think that one. I think. So, biggest your favorite trend in e-commerce or digital marketing? I think
trend or innovation, yeah.
Yeah, I think the real innovation will come from understanding that you need to go back to basics. And this is a very personal opinion, but I feel like we're flooded with tools and technology and AR and everything. It's so easy to go out there and find something that gets your life a lot easier. But then that is something that keeps you away from your ABC, right? From doing your ABC very right and very well. So I think the real innovation would be to, make sure you can separate between what's important and what it's necessary, right? I feel like there is a difference between these two concepts. So I would say that for us, at least, innovation is like, now it's like, let's talk about doing the basics right. And this is something that's kind of no one was expecting to be on the table right at this stage. And I feel somehow it's kind of innovating in a way to, let's forget about all this ecosystem and it's good. It's still there. It's not going to go away. But let's make sure that we innovate by making sure that we have the very best ABC and the very basics are done right, And so it's not so much about technology to me. It's about understanding the role that technology plays and understanding that it is a very important role, but it's not the only role you need to take into account.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
Yeah, I'm going to quote you a mathematician from like the 50s. And this is actually the guy's called Roy Amara. And Amara's law says we tend to overestimate the effect of a new technology in the short run. And we tend to underestimate the effect that it may have in the long run. And I think that's exactly what we're looking at. AI is going to hit big, but it's going to hit big, probably fast, in a slower pace than we think. So, and everything that's in the meanwhile, it's leading up to that moment when this is really starting to happen. And I think I sort of mentioned these things before. There's, I think, 5 key areas that are super important. Structured data, customer insights, content creation, system integration, and front-end development. And I think eventually e-commerce is going to move towards a much more conversational proposition. We're now looking at an HTML website that's great for Google, but it's not per se great for me, finding my new pair of shoes. A conversation is better. Hey, I need a new pair of shoes. Oh, for what occasion? Oh, this occasion. What color? What's your body? Like in the store. And technology is not able to do it yet, but it is going to happen, but probably later than we think, and it's going to have massive impacts. That's what I think.
All right, Joachim?
Yeah, I love the back to basics one, and I completely agree with it. I'm maybe going to go another route and, knowing what's in the works with kind of the biggest social media networks, because we have great relationships and partnerships with these companies. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, and that's already happening, which is social commerce, like being able to buy directly, like when the intent is happening, so between so the innovation for me is like the shortening the time between the decision to buy and the act of buying, and that's something that we're like seeing like shorten more and more. Like now you can buy directly on social channels, and it's going to be become increasingly popular, like on any of the channels that we mentioned before, like to being able to in one click buy. And that's some of the things that we're seeing in the partnerships and discussions that we're having with some of these big players.
All right, thank you.
If I may add to what Joachim is saying,
sure.
I totally agree with what he's saying, with what he says. And then I think you just launched Shopify Markets, right? Is it called Shopify Markets? I think this is another breakthrough innovation, meaning that there's some guys out there, namely Shopify, Global-e, other like major players, who are just trying to burst all the barriers for international commerce, right? When you're trying to sell from Spain to the rest of the world, you have to deal with a lot of customs problems. I mean, every country has their own, like their own properties, right? And very specific scenarios. So to have someone, working on a blended solution that kind of makes the international market more accessible. This is something that is completely new, because 2 years ago it really took a lot of admin work, a lot of painful workarounds to be able to sell globally. But now you just you switch, you basically connect your store to a solution, to an IT solution, and it's much more easier.
Thank you a lot, guys. So I think now we run out of time, and we are going to reach the end of this session. It was a very big pleasure to talk with you guys and to get all your insightful point of view and tips and trends about digital marketing and e-commerce. And I'm sure it's going to help a lot new brands going on the market, or even like brands already on the market with all these tips. To our attendees also, I would like to thanks for being here today, and I hope they had a good time during this session and also this event. The event will be still open with networking and one-to-one meetings and sponsors booths that you can discover with a lot of interesting product and people. And also all the session of today will still be here for replays, so you can actually watch it again. So guys, thank you very much for this session. It was a pleasure. Have a good evening, and hope
thank you for organizing.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and
have a good day.
Bye bye.
See you later, guys. Have a lovely evening. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.